They cheated. I stayed silent then. The first thing I lost wasn't trust. It was the sound of my own voice. There was a time when I used to ask questions. Where are you going? Who are you texting? Why are you late again? But one day I stopped asking. Not because I didn't care, but because I started seeing answers everywhere. It began with small things. A phone turned face down on the table. A smile that didn't reach his eyes. A laugh that came too easily while he scrolled through messages he never shared with me. At night he'd roll away from me, claiming exhaustion, stress, work. I believed him. Or maybe I wanted to. People think betrayal arrives loudly, like a door slammed shut. But mine arrived quietly. Soft footsteps. Careful lies. Polite distance. The day I found the proof, nothing dramatic happened. No shaking hands. No racing heart. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything across the room. I simply stared at the screen while my coffee went cold beside me. Hotel confirmations. Photos that weren't meant for me. Messages written with a tenderness he hadn't used on me in years. And still, I stayed silent. Not because I was weak. Not because I was afraid. But because in that moment, I realized something terrifying and powerful at the same time. Silence gives you time. Not because I was weak. Not because I was afraid. But because in that moment, I realized something terrifying and powerful at the same time. Silence gives you time. Time to see patterns. Time to understand who someone really is when they think you're blind. Time to decide whether you want closure or control. So I watched. I watched how he kissed my forehead before leaving the house, as if nothing had changed. I watched how he laughed at dinner, how he talked about our future, how easily lies slid off his tongue. And with every performance, something inside me hardened. Not into anger, but into clarity. You see, when someone cheats on you, they expect chaos. They expect tears. They expect confrontation. What they don't expect is calm. They don't expect you to keep smiling, to keep cooking dinner, to keep saying good night like nothing is wrong. But calm is dangerous when it's intentional. Every silent day gave me more information, more proof, more strength. I learned when he lied, how he covered his tracks, who knew and who stayed quiet. I learned how quickly loyalty disappears when people think they won't be held accountable. And all the while he thought he was winning. He thought my silence meant forgiveness. He thought my patience meant ignorance. He thought I would never leave. What he didn't know was that I was already gone. Gone emotionally. Gone mentally. Gone from the version of myself that begged for honesty. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't dreaming of humiliation. I was planning freedom. Because the most devastating moment for someone who betrays you isn't when you yell. It isn't when you cry. It isn't even when you leave. It's when they finally realize. You saw everything. You said nothing. And you chose yourself anyway. They cheated. I stayed silent. And what came next changed everything. I used to believe that love was built on honesty. Not the dramatic kind. Not grand confessions or emotional speeches. But the quiet, everyday honesty. The kind that shows up in small moments. A shared glance. A familiar routine. A sense of safety. For years I thought we had that. We met in a way that felt ordinary enough to be real. No fireworks. No instant obsession. Just two people whose lives slowly intertwined until us felt inevitable. We moved in together. We built habits. Sunday mornings with coffee that went cold while we talked about nothing. Weeknight dinners eaten on the couch. Inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else. From the outside, our life looked stable. Comfortable. Predictable. And I thought that was enough. The change didn't come suddenly. There was no single moment where I could say, this is where it all went wrong. Instead, it crept in quietly, disguised as stress, work pressure, exhaustion. Things people understand. Things people excuse. He started coming home later. Not dramatically late, just late enough to notice. His phone became an extension of his hand. Always present. Always face down. If a notification lit up the screen, he'd flip it over without thinking. Muscle memory. Instinct. First I ignored it. I didn't want to be that person, suspicious, insecure, searching for problems that might not exist. I told myself this was adulthood. Responsibilities. Busy schedules. Normal distance. But distance feels different when it's intentional. He stopped asking about my day. Stopped noticing when I changed my hair or wore something new. Conversations became functional logistics instead of connection. Bills, groceries, plans, sleep. At night he would turn away from me, scrolling through his phone in the dark, the glow lighting up his face. Sometimes he'd smile at the screen. Not a big smile, just enough. And that was when something inside me shifted. Not panic, not jealousy, awareness. I didn't accuse him. I didn't demand answers. I didn't snoop right away. I simply started paying attention, listening more carefully, watching more closely. Silence teaches you things noise never will. I noticed patterns. Late nights always on the same days. Work trips that never came with stories. Sudden interest in his appearance. New clothes, new cologne, a care he hadn't shown in years. Still I said nothing. People often confuse silence with ignorance. But silence, when chosen, is a form of control. It gives you space to think without being manipulated by explanations and half-truths. The proof didn't arrive in a dramatic way. It never does. One afternoon, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while he was in the shower. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't shaking. I didn't feel desperate. I picked it up simply because it was there. A name I didn't recognize. A message that wasn't meant for me. Last night was worth the wait. That was it. No explanation needed. No context required. I unlocked the phone, not with guilt but with certainty. Photos, messages, plans. A parallel life unfolding neatly behind my back. Hotel reservations, jokes, complaints about stress at home, complaints about me. And still, I didn't cry. I sat at the table and read everything. Carefully, slowly, like someone reviewing documents they'd need later. I memorized dates, times, names. I noticed how long it had been going on. Longer than I expected. Long enough to mean choice. When he came out of the shower, towel around his waist, humming like nothing in the world was wrong, I looked up and smiled. He smiled back. That was the moment I understood something important. The person I loved was already gone. What remained was someone who believed I would never leave. So I stayed silent. Not because I didn't hurt, but because I was done being surprised. After that day, my life split into two versions. One was the version he saw. The version that laughed at his jokes, cooked dinner, asked about his meetings and said drive safe when he left the house. The version that looked exactly the same as before. Familiar. Predictable. Safe. The other version lived quietly inside my head. That version stopped believing explanations. Stopped romanticizing memories. Stopped assuming intentions were good. I became an observer. It's strange how much people reveal when they think they've already won. When they believe you're comfortable. When they believe you're not paying attention. He grew careless. He stopped hiding his phone as carefully. He stepped outside to take calls, assuming I wouldn't follow. He reused excuses, forgetting which ones he'd already told me. I wrote everything down, not on paper but in my mind. Dates, times, stories that didn't match. And with every lie, something inside me became quieter, colder, not angry, focused. I watched how he complained about me to her. How I was suddenly distant, too serious, always tired. I watched how he rewrote our life to make himself feel justified. That hurt more than the cheating itself. Because betrayal isn't just about intimacy. It's about erasing someone while they're still standing right in front of you. At night, when he slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and planned nothing. Not revenge. Not confrontation. Just clarity. What did I want? I didn't want apologies. I didn't want tears. I didn't want promises. I wanted my power back. So I prepared quietly. I opened a separate bank account. Started moving small amounts. Nothing noticeable. I gathered documents. Screenshots. Evidence. Not to threaten him but to protect myself. I spoke to a lawyer I'd been referred to by a friend, framing everything as just asking questions. And still, I stayed silent. He mistook my calm for forgiveness. He started talking about the future again. Vacations. Buying a house. Children. As if none of it had already collapsed. As if trust could be rebuilt without truth. One night over dinner he reached for my hand and said, "I'm really lucky to have you." I squeezed his hand back and smiled. because in that moment I knew something he didn't. Luck had nothing to do with what was coming next. Silence is misunderstood. People think it's empty. A pause, a delay, an absence of action. But silence, when chosen, is full. It fills your mind with focus. It removes emotion from decision-making. It lets you see reality without filters. That's where my plan began. Not with anger. Not with revenge fantasies. With logistics. I started asking myself practical questions. The kind no one asks when they're still hoping things will magically fix themselves. Where would I live? What accounts were in my name? What did I need to leave without asking permission? I didn't rush. Rushing is what people do when they're reacting. I wasn't reacting anymore, I was preparing. I continued playing my role perfectly. Morning coffee. Casual conversations. Listening while he talked about his day, his stress, his ambitions. Sometimes he even complained about her. About how demanding she was, how complicated things had become. The irony didn't escape me. He thought I was his safe place. His stability. His backup. I let him believe that. Meanwhile, I scheduled another meeting with the lawyer. This time I brought everything. Screenshots. Messages. Proof of shared expenses. Proof of deceit. The lawyer didn't look surprised. She rarely does. She's been doing this for a while, she said gently. You're not crazy. I nodded. I already knew. We talked about options. Separation. Divorce. Timelines. What silence could protect and what it couldn't. I chose the path that gave me the most control and the least exposure. I wasn't trying to destroy him publicly. I was trying to leave cleanly. At home, he grew more comfortable. Too comfortable. He stopped deleting messages. He took longer work trips. He stopped pretending as hard. Comfort breeds carelessness. He believed I had accepted things, or worse, that I would never leave. That belief was his mistake. One evening, he casually mentioned her name out loud by accident. Caught himself. Laughed it off as a coworker. I didn't react. That scared him more than anger ever could have. I saw it in his eyes, that flicker of doubt. That moment where he wondered if I knew. But he pushed it down. People always do. It's easier to believe someone is blind than to admit you've been exposed. That night, I packed a small bag and hid it in my car. Just essentials. Documents. Clothes. Things I didn't want to replace. I wasn't leaving yet. But I was ready. Because when the truth finally comes out, timing matters. Not for drama, for impact. And I was done being unprepared. I didn't plan the reveal for a dramatic moment. No public dinner. No shouting match. No thrown accusations. I planned it for a moment when he felt safest. It was a quiet evening. Ordinary. The kind of night that looks forgettable in hindsight, which made it perfect. He came home late, kissed my cheek, dropped his keys on the counter like he always did. Routine is comforting. And dangerous. We ate dinner. Talked about nothing important. He told me about work. I nodded at the right moments. I asked the right questions. I even smiled. After dinner, he sat on the couch scrolling through his phone. I cleaned the kitchen slowly, calmly, like I wasn't about to change both our lives. When I sat beside him, he looked surprised, pleased even, as if this small gesture confirmed everything he believed. What's wrong? He asked casually. I looked at him and realized something strange. I didn't hate him. Hate requires energy, emotion, attachment. I felt finished. I know, I said. Just 2 words. He laughed at first. Know what? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I reached into my bag and placed my phone between us. Opened to the screenshots. Messages. Dates. Hotels. Names. I let the silence do the work. His face changed in slow motion. Confusion first. Then fear. Then calculation. He started talking too fast, too much. Explanations piled on top of each other, each one contradicting the last. It didn't mean anything. It was a mistake. I was going to tell you. It's not what it looks like. I let him talk. Because when people panic, they reveal truths they've rehearsed avoiding. When he finally stopped, breathless and desperate, I said something he wasn't prepared for. I'm not here to argue. That stopped him cold. I told him I'd already spoken to a lawyer. That I'd already separated finances. That I had copies of everything. That I wasn't asking for honesty. I was informing him of my decision. I stood up. He reached for my arm. We can fix this. I gently removed his hand. No, I said. You made choices. I respected them by watching quietly. Now you'll respect mine. I didn't storm out. I didn't slam doors. I picked up my bag. And I left. I didn't announce my departure. I didn't post anything. I didn't call his family. I didn't explain myself to mutual friends. I disappeared quietly. And that silence did more damage than any public exposure ever could. First, he tried to control the narrative. He told people we were taking space. That I was confused. That I'd overreacted. People nodded. They always do when the truth hasn't arrived yet. But lies have an expiration date. Without me, his life started unraveling in small, unglamorous ways. Bills he didn't know how to manage. Appointments he forgot. Responsibilities he'd never noticed because I handled them. Then came the questions. Why wasn't I answering calls? Why had I moved my things? Why was a lawyer contacting him instead of me? The woman he cheated with didn't want a man in free fall. She wanted excitement, not consequences. When she realized she was now the main character instead of the escape, she disappeared. That loss hit him harder than losing me. At work he slipped. Missed deadlines. Short temper. No one noticed at first, then everyone did. Trust erodes quietly before it collapses publicly. Friends began asking questions. Real ones. I didn't answer them. As I didn't need to. The truth moves faster when you don't chase it. One day he finally understood something he'd avoided for months. He didn't lose me because I found out. He lost me because I watched, prepared, and chose myself. I didn't rebuild my life overnight. Healing isn't dramatic. It doesn't come with music or instant clarity. It arrives quietly in ordinary moments. The first morning you wake up without dread. The first time you breathe without checking your phone. The first laugh that feels real again. I moved into a small place. Nothing fancy. Just enough space to remind myself that peace doesn't need witnesses. For a while silence followed me there too. But this time it wasn't heavy. It wasn't strategic. It was honest. I learned things about myself I'd never had time to notice before. How strong I could be without being loud. How much lighter life feels when you stop negotiating your worth. How powerful it is to leave without asking for permission. He tried to reach out again months later. Not with apologies, with nostalgia. Memories. Regret disguised as reflection. I read the message once. Then I deleted it. Because closure doesn't come from conversations that arrive too late. I didn't hate him. I didn't wish him pain. I just didn't carry him anymore. The most unexpected part wasn't that he cheated. It was that I survived it without becoming bitter. People think silence is what breaks you. They're wrong. Silence is what saved me. Because while he was busy rewriting the story to protect himself, I was quietly writing a new one without him in it. They cheated. I stayed silent. And then, I walked away with everything that mattered. Sometimes the strongest revenge isn't destruction. It's peace.